This is a very special part of the evening where we get to honor our members and also our spring honorees for all of their contributions not only to India but also to AIF. Our first honoree of the evening will be Professor Amartya Sen. I want to start off with one of his more famous quotes. Prolixity is not alien to us in India. We are able to talk at some length. Those, of course, are the first two sentences of The Argumentative Indian, one of Professor Sen's seminal pieces of work on India and its culture and identity. And Professor Sen, I can absolutely tell you in our household, my husband agrees with you 200%. Amartya Sen has many identities that are well known to us. He's a Nobel laureate, a professor, an academic, a philosopher, and simply put, a leading thinker. In his Nobel Prize autobiography, Professor Sen writes of one of his most vivid childhood experiences, where he saw violence right in front of his eyes. And he said, "It alerted me to the remarkable fact that economic unfreedom, in the form of extreme poverty, can make a person a helpless prey in the violation of other kinds of freedom." And since then, Professor Sen has dedicated his life and work to help those less fortunate find those freedoms. Professor Sen's relationship with AIF dates back almost a decade. He's been a chair of AIF's advisory council before. And tonight, on behalf of the 1.7 million beneficiaries who AIF has supported, we are proud to honor Professor Amartya Sen.
What do I do? Oh my God. Thank you, Liz. Okay. Oh, that was it. Thank you very much. What do I do?
And please, if you can take a seat.
I sit?
Yes.
All right.
Our next honoree of the evening is Ajay Banga, President and CEO of MasterCard. Now, it's very, very easy for me to talk about Ajay Banga's business acumen. I'm in business news, so we talk about MasterCard all the time. And also, a lot of you who own MasterCard stock, well, there's no need to tell you about what's been happening. But before MasterCard, Mr. Banga held distinguished posts at Nestle and Citigroup. But I wanted to ask, who is Ajay Banga? What is he really about? So I asked one of his friends, give me a couple of descriptors about Mr. Banga. Here's what he told me. Nothing to do with business at all. He said exuberant, kind-hearted, and generous. Ajay Banga has an equally distinguished scorecard to alleviate some of the world's most pressing issues. His work in microfinance, memberships with groups like the Council of Foreign Relations, the Asia Society, cement his devotion to ensuring social responsibility in his business practice while also driving business success. Mr. Banga is a genuine leader of the socially conscious business movement. Congratulations, Mr. Ajay Banga.
Thank you. Thanks again. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So congratulations to you.
Oh, congratulations to you.
I think the only thing my mother would have said is I'm dashingly handsome. You forgot that.
Our third honoree of this evening unfortunately could not be here, but she's such a phenomenal woman, I must read you her bio anyway. From a speech pathologist to journalist to India media titan, Radhika Roy's path has been nothing short of extraordinary. As co-founder, co-owner, and executive chairperson of New Delhi Television, NDTV, she transformed a small startup production company into an internationally renowned news operation comprising of 3 channels and over 1,000 employees. Together with her husband Prannoy, she galvanized Indian television by creating the country's first privately owned news channel. Her accolades are many, one of them being the most 25 powerful women in India business. But perhaps her most highest distinction, the recognition of her uncompromising devotion to journalistic and business ethics. Her dedication to professional ethics and integrity has revolutionized Indian television and shines through NDTV. On behalf of America India Foundation, we accept this reward for her. Thank you. our last honoree of the evening is Mr. Prannoy Roy. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I like to use Twitter a lot. I've been known to tweet, maybe perhaps too much. My handle is @SheilaD_TV in case anyone wants to tweet me. So one of the things I always tend to do, especially when it comes to public figures, is to look at what they're tweeting. Well, I looked at Dr. Prannoy's
Thank
tweet,
you.
and one that caught my eye is where he said, "This is the new India." The new India's headline is, "India's fighting win." It's that kind of vivacity that has led Dr. Prannoy Roy to be called the television personality of the millennium by the Indian Express poll. But beyond the TV screen, what many don't know is that he's had a lot of careers. Consulting, academia, even government. Dr. Roy's primary focus is elections and the study of electoral behavior. In fact, it's a subject he's so enthralled by, he's co-authored 4 books on it. Along with his wife, Radhika, Dr. Roy has transformed the field of news reporting in India, and his commitment to responsible journalism has made his NDTV news coverage the most highly regarded news source in India today. Congratulations, Dr. Prannoy Roy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our honorees for being here tonight and joining us, and also thank them for indulging me. I insisted on this portion of the evening. With such phenomenal people here in front of us, with such intellect, I said, we want to hear what they all have to say. They have thoughts, they have interesting notions that we all want to hear. So now I'd like to start a quick Q&A panel just to get a few of their thoughts on some of the biggest issues facing India today.
Thank you.
You know, many of us here are business people, and we also get The Economist. There was a very famous Economist cover several years ago that had a picture of a tiger and then a picture of a dragon. Then India was a superpower. It was rising. Everyone was so excited about it. Now, people are talking about replacing the I in BRIC nations with Indonesia. Now, I think most of us will agree here that the India story certainly isn't over. There's so much opportunity, there's so much possibility, but certainly it's been tarnished a little bit. So I'd like to start by asking each of you, what are the 1 or 2 prescriptives you have for India as a nation? What do they absolutely need to address in order to reshape and retell that India story? Professor Sen, why don't we start with you?
With me? You know, I think I'm going to sleep on economics, but that story about tiger is very much connected with economics, because, you know, if you're looking at the field of literature, music, drama, sculpture, all kinds of things, I think India's tradition hasn't in any way been threatened in terms of comparison with Indonesia. I have a great admirer of Indonesia in many ways, but I think that factually is correct. I think what's happened in the economic context is we have to understand, you know, I have a somewhat critical view on that. I think there's something has gone wrong about not so much just the government policy, but the entire public debate on what India ought to do. If you think about the Asian economic model, which began really in Japan in Meiji Restoration, 1860s, it's been driven by massive expansion of social care, education. The Japanese insisted that in 30 years they will become fully literate, and they were. Followed by Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, and small way Hong Kong, Singapore, and then of course in a big way China. Now, India was never, when that position was there, was never thought to be about to overtake China, although some people love talking about that. But I think the combination of doing those things that expand human ability, human capability, interest, and the economy and the society has been a major feature of the Asian economic model. It drove them in those days when we talked about 4 tigers and so on, and that was what they were doing. Indonesia went up there too, right, quite clearly. Now, we still have Indonesia much higher literacy than we have. There are a lot of ways in which, you know, the concentration recently has been so much just on how the market economy works without actually seeing how the market economy depends on many other things, like healthcare, society, education, and so forth. This isn't an original Indian mistake. And when Jamshedji Tata arrives in what we now call Jamshedpur, set up the steel factory, and it's quite clear his early remarks are that I have to not only start a factory, but have to act as a municipality. It's British India. The government may not be doing it, but I have to provide free education, free healthcare for all, not just employees of the Tata Industries.
So Professor Sen, you're taking
And I think that, if I may just complete one thing, in many ways, I think we have done far less in this respect than we could have. Now, Indonesia had not done dramatically better, but quite a bit better. And we have to see, when we analyze what's gone wrong, we have to see that it's not just a question of skillful tax incentives and so forth. It's a vision about what development is about, what I would call AIF vision, actually. I mean, what did we see? We saw people being educated. They're being taken care of. Now, I think this not only changes the lives of human beings, but it also makes it possible for industries to prosper in a massive way, which the people in the Japanese Meiji Restoration already understood. I think they're probably the first in the Asia to understand that. And which, the Tata story I was telling you was only 30 years or 40 years later after that. So in some ways, if there's something we have missed out, is to understand what drove the Asian success. After all, Asia is the continent of dynamic economy now, and there's a reason for it. And if we live in a country in which 50% of the people don't have any toilets in their homes, India has a higher ratio of open defecation than any other country in the world other than Chad. We have a lower level of literacy than most countries, including clearly Indonesia. Lower assurance of healthcare. We have a kind of out-of-pocket system which really doesn't function. It isn't that, the government in a democracy will do what the public wants. So we have to put much more pressure on that. So if I were to emphasize something, I'd like to change the nature of the public dialogue in India and bring India more in the main Asian success.
changing the dialogue of India. Now, changing the dialogue of India certainly isn't an easy task to do when you're talking about a country with so many subcultures, with so many languages, with over 1 billion people. Mr. Banga, what's the corporate social responsibility angle? What do corporations need to do to help change that dialogue, to open it?
Well, corporate social responsibility has now become a sort of a fashionable word, and if you go beyond the fashion and you think about what's really involved, it's about trying to give something back to the community where you live and work. And if you do that, it's in your enlightened self-interest. Because if you've got people who can afford to spend money, most companies will actually benefit from the power of that middle class. And I think that's kind of what it should be for. You should be doing it not just to do good, but you should be doing it to do well and do good at the same time. And I think companies can do it in different ways. Our company, when we had our IPO, the owners of our company were earlier the banks. And when the IPO happened, they took 12% of the company and put it into a foundation, which, given the way our stock price is today, is a $6.5 billion foundation, which is run independently of this company. It's the second largest foundation today in the world, sitting in Toronto. And called the MasterCard Foundation. It runs independently as it should, and it focuses on the plight of women and young people. I think that's kind of one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is do your own business the right way. I mean, our business is we're in the business of killing cash. That's our business. We're not in the business of anything else. If you kill cash the right way, I firmly believe, and Dr. Sen can bear me out, cash is expensive. Cash costs money, and the debate about the public dialogue on cash is infantile. It does not understand that cash costs between 0.5 and 1.5% of GDP to print, produce, and distribute. It costs money in terms of corruption. You cannot have corruption without large amounts of cash floating around. It costs money in terms of tax evasion. You cannot evade taxes long term without cash. It costs money in terms of illegal cross-border activity. If you've grown up in this country, drugs have been coming to this country from certain countries south of the border for 30 years. They did not come in exchange for a Citibank credit card payment. And if you live in Mexico and you see the guns that are being available on the streets of Mexico today, which people say came from the United States, they don't come in exchange for an HSBC bank wire transfer. Cash has got enormous cost to society. We're in the business of killing cash. So we do that through governments. So we're doing it in India by helping Aadhaar find ways to allow a farmer to buy potatoes and onions in their village shop using a mobile as a point of sale, as my colleagues at Amex are trying to do, right? And hey, they're pals of mine, by the way. So, and I have another bunch of friends here from Discover. So the only guys missing are a certain 4-letter word company, which is all our competitors. But they're not around. But the others are here. We're all in the same business. You can make subsidies become far more efficient. We worked with the Punjab government to replace the public distribution system payment, which goes through agents in mandis with cards. They have found that 42% was the leakage before the card payment. That's an $8 billion program. 42% of $8 billion. AIF could do a great deal with 5% of that 42%. That's the problem. Cash is expensive. Cash costs money. Cash leads to corruption. We're in the business of killing cash.
Well done.
Dr. Roy, Professor Sen talked about changing the dialogue in India, opening that dialogue in India. One would argue you are that dialogue in India by owning the airwaves to do so. Mr. Banga talked about corruption and how a cashless society could potentially change that. You've covered corruption this entire past year in India. I've seen your interviews. You've talked so much about cash transfers, issues with it. What's your take on this?
Well, I guess in the two areas I won't touch on will be economics or business. In fact, given everybody
What's the
here,
role of the media?
I better stay away from those.
He's pretty good at doing that, so don't listen to this.
So yeah, I'll talk a bit about the dialogue. First of all, I'd like to say that Radhika apologizes to everybody for not being here. She was planning to come, but something came up. So she's deeply honored, and I have a message for her to say sorry for not being here. I guess prescriptions for India, I mean, there are so many, but I'm actually fairly optimistic. And as part of the dialogue we're talking about, I think we are currently going through a cleansing process. The corruption that we hear has been around for ages. We are exposing it now. We are aggressive about it, and we are proud to be fearless about it. And the more we expose these guys, it is now tougher and tougher to be corrupt in India, because you've got a mic under your nose everywhere. There's a camera and you're watching every move you make. So the cost of corruption is pretty high. And part of it is the vibrancy of the media in India, which I'm extremely proud of. Of course, they do go over the top sometimes, but if you talked about a small prescription, I think which we've been trying to advocate, which something is perhaps said something this year, it really pains me to see 100 million tons of food grains and children dying of malnutrition. India needs only 20 to 25 million tons of food grains as a buffer, and we have 100 million tons. It's a sign that we don't care. So first prescription is get those food grains to the people. Show you care. I think the government hoarding those food grains eaten by rats, but just hoarding them. We've done several stories where we've got 100 million tons and children dying, and we're putting pressure on the government to get their act together and not use any excuses. There's no excuse for that. We can produce more than we need, and we're not distributing it. It's a failure of our management system. So that's. I would also say that as a psephologist, study of elections, over the years, we've noticed the electorate in India from becoming very passive. In the first 25 years, 80% of governments were voted back. Then the second phase was an angry electorate. The next 25 years, 80% of governments were thrown out. Now we're in a phase 3 where you've got a mature voter. And 50% of governments are out and 50% are voted back. Those that perform are voted back. So it's great to see the Indian voter pushing our politicians to deliver on Bijli Sarak Pani, on developments. Otherwise they wouldn't do a thing. And it's our democracy which makes me feel it's just great to be in a country that has proven to the world that you can be a big democracy and still grow at 8 to 9%. We're the first country to do that, and I'm very proud to be part of that. But we got to make a lot of corrections. There's little doubt that India is currently a society which is a punishment-free society. I remember a finance minister that I work for saying, paying taxes in India is a voluntary exercise. Because if you don't pay, nothing happens. That's about most things in India. You can drive down the wrong side of the road, right-hand side, which is the wrong side in India. From Delhi to Dehradun, nothing happens to you. You can do what you like. Nothing is a punishment-free society. So if you talk about a prescription, I think we should listen to the young kids who went out and demonstrated after the tragic, the horror faced by the girl in Delhi. We should listen to the youngsters, and they speak with passion, and they want something done. And I think our government better do something. And the way to start is to get punishment done quick, swift, and publicly visible. Like our courts, our judicial system, I think that's a start we need to make. We need to actually revamp that, revamp our police, and be gender sensitive. And I think we can do it, and the youngsters like you are pushing us in that direction. And I'm hopeful on that, very hopeful.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about that for a dialogue? These three honorees have given us just a nugget of the dialogue to come for years, all the issues to face, and that we can do something about here. We are doing something about it at AIF. Let's all thank once again Professor Amartya Sen, Mr. Ajay Banga, and Dr. Prannoy Roy.
And thanks to you.